know what? One of the questions I did have is I never, I've just recently listened to Total, that both their albums and a few tracks they had on soundtracks. I'm thinking, man, they had some really solid tracks, especially the second album, which unfortunately didn't get promoted and pushed right. Because I think Sitting in My Room was a nice track, but it should never have been their follow-up single. And I'm like, why didn't they get as big as SWV? Because far from the first album, they could really sing. They had three different distinct voices. They had the looks. They had the charismatic Pamela Long. But then their second album went gold, and they just sort of fell off. And I do wonder why they weren't bigger as a girl group. What your thoughts were?
Um, so SWV was signed to RCA,
Yes.
and in the 90s, RCA, it kind of struggled in the Black music realm. Like, it had some successful artists, but for the most part, SWV at the time was probably their biggest act. So they had a lot of money and time and energy to focus on SWV being one of their, few successes during the 90s.
Mm.
Um, then they don't have a lot of artists from the early 90s that were really that successful. They didn't really start really picking up until the merger that happened in the mid 2000s. But and I guess they did have some success later on in the 90s with Tyrese. They signed Tyrese. He had a platinum album, a few things. But with Toto, they were kind of on a label that had so many artists that was fighting for attention. It knew Notorious B.I.G. was on there,
Yeah, he was there.
Faith,
Yeah.
Maze, G-Dep, 112,
112,
so
Carl
many different
Thomas.
acts. And, a lot of them were writing for each other. And so, with SWV, their first album was largely produced by Brian Austin Morgan. And he had a lot of time
Alexander
to,
Morgan.
what did I say?
Austin. You
Did I
said
say
Austin.
Austin? I knew
Yeah.
I knew it was gonna be one time I made that mistake and said Austin. Okay, Brian Alexander. Sorry, Brian. Alexander Morgan. And he had a chance to really carve a unique sound for SWV. And it was just kind of like a lightning in a bottle, lightning strikes kind of thing where it just happened for SWV. And I just personally think, to be honest, and no shade, because I love Total,
Mm,
but SWV they were better singers. They were more talented, in my opinion. I just think that
mm,
they were more talented vocally. And so when you have um Coco, you can do so much with Coco's voice, whereas
mm.
Total, they're talented, but I think in the grand scheme of things, they're kind of limited vocally. Only so many things you can do with their voices. And so they kind of but ultimately they did have success. It just wasn't going to be on the same level. And also, I think that the bad girl image that they were going for and how raunchy their music started to become, it limited their scope. SWV had some raunchy songs, but not so raunchy to where, like, Downtown was like one of those sexual, what is it, double entendre things,
Yeah,
where
you don't unless
you
you
could
knew
play it on
what
the
they're
radio,
talking.
nobody really.
Yeah,
Right,
I didn't know what they
maybe
were
they're
talking
going
about
downtown
until.
shopping, like
Yeah, yeah,
Coco thought,
yeah.
or
I didn't
whatever.
understand the
Whereas
song. Yeah,
right, when you listen to Total second album, I mean, it's just all out there. So it's a lot of
yeah,
freaky deaky songs.
yeah.
So that's that overt sexuality, especially in the 90s, kind of and explicit, because there's a lot of explicit lyrics too. That limited your audience. That's different today. I mean, you know,
Yeah,
vulgar
pretty much.
lyrics are the norm. Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
but it just kind of limited what they could do. And SWV, they kind of was the girls around the way kind of,
Mm.
thing. So it just was more appealing to a wider audience. But
Yeah, I mean, because I was disappointed. I mean, maybe I'm biased because I spoke to both Pamela and Kima, but as I said, listening to the second album, I hadn't realized the Pamela, Keisha, and Kima album. I said, wow, about half the tracks were produced by Missy and Timbaland, and they had some really good beats. But um, maybe they were just finding their feet until not until when they did the Aaliyah album that they were a little bit more the good girl, baby girl.
Well, that second album,
Aaliyah's one
they
or
kind of, I'm talking about Total.
Total, yeah,
So
yeah.
when Total put out their second album, I think that album could have catapulted them to another level.
That's what I thought.
But if we remember, that's during when they kind of broke up. So when a label senses that there's internal conflicts, they don't want to put too much money behind you, especially if they got a feeling that you're going to break up. They lose kind of, because you're more of a headache in a way. And I think that Total became kind of a headache because there was a lot of internal beefs going on, and also they probably were complaining about not making no money. So that part of it too, because they only put out 2 singles for that second album. I don't think Sitting at Home should have been the second single.
Yeah, that was it was
I
a
thought
nice
that was a
track,
bad
but
choice.
it just didn't.
Yeah, that's like track number 4. Like that's not. I mean, or single number 4. That's not like.
It's not even a single. I mean, they had some bigger hits on their album.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
But so you must be right, because even in the video, it was just Pam in the video, and then the others onto around. So it's probably right that, and I didn't really connect the dots where they might. This is where they're having their fallouts, and it's like, because it happened with Guy when they came out with Dancing, and then all of a sudden the second single was Why You Want to Keep Me for My Baby, and there's no Teddy in the video, and it was almost as if he's back with Blackstreet, and it was like, I was like, what's going on here? Okay.
And another thing I do want to mention real quick too is there is no guarantees in the music industry. I mean, you can be a great singer, you can have all the great producers, you can have all of that, but there's just no guarantee that people are going to take to you. Like, it's so many different variables. I don't know that Total will get the same. They were getting the same promotional push that SWV was. SWV were in a perfect position where they're the main group. They're the main R&B urban group on the label, really bringing in the numbers. So the label's going to constantly put money behind that. Whereas Bad Boy is an imprint on Arista Records at the time, and they're being given a budget, so they're going to kind of like it's more budget kind of decisions going on there. So and then like I said, there was groups like Pure Soul. I used to love this group named Pure Soul. They had Teddy Riley producing on the album, and the guys who produced for In Vogue and things like that. It's some other people that kind of eluding my mind. And they had a pretty good album, but they were great singers, but it just did not work out. It was the label. The label didn't have a lot of staying power and know-how to navigate the industry. So, it's all about having the lightning in the bottle situation. Sometimes it just works and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, you're right. And forget about Arista, who had Jive Records, and they had LaFace, and they had so many. Yeah, they had so many different people to push through.
Rowdy Records, Dallas Austin.
Yeah, with Monica. So guys, let us know what your thoughts are. Why Total didn't blow up as big as SWV, and if they had better, if they could have been bigger, or if not as big, and remembered. But it's always good to get your comments. I mean, that to me, as I said, it's just when you listen to the album, you're like, how come they didn't release this? What? This is a banger. And then you realize, and then, as I said, then you bring up the fact that, they were going for their drama and stuff. And then they just said, let's just put out one single and move on. I mean, labels were ruthless back then. It's like, yep, let's shelve this, move to the next one. They didn't even think twice about it.
Labels have always been ruthless. But anyway, they're always
okay, guys.
They're always going to be that way. But anyway, let us know. See you next time, guys.
All right.